I guess it is the human condition to ponder the passage of time. And actually, when I look at the august group of people I'm sharing this platform with, I realize that collectively we've probably all known each other for over 100 years, which is a slightly sobering thought. Sven, I came to...
Not a very charming beginning.
No. Don't worry, Thomas, it gets worse. I came to your track and field meeting in 1979. I think any athlete that gets invited in their late teens, early 20s to a large European track and field meet feels that they sort of have come of age. This is probably not the moment to tell the president of the IOC that actually it was you, Sven, that broke my amateur code for the first time in the sport. If the Inland Revenue are sitting in this room, so I'd rather that didn't leave. And Thomas, let me digress just for a few moments, because you and I met in 1981 in Baden-Baden when your predecessor, Juan Antonio Samaranch, had the good sense and vision to understand that the changes, and change is a recurring theme this morning, but the changes that he sought from the Olympic movement had to be made in tandem with the athletes. And he gave us both the opportunity to meet on that occasion, then to be members of the first Athletes Commission that is now considered to be constitutionally and in terms of governance is the bread and butter of all our big and great sporting organizations. And Patrick, we met relatively later in life. It was actually in a restaurant in Almeria when we were both there, and I was grubbing for votes for London, and your wise counsel and independent observations were greatly received at that point. And thank you, all three of you. In fact, I'm the only person I haven't actually heard of on this platform this morning. So I'm delighted to be here. I'm also delighted to be here because I was actually, my first engagement as president was to the Balkan Athletics Congress. And I spoke and did a lot of things there, but the more ridiculous thing I did was to leave my glasses behind. So I'd like to thank the Serbian Track and Field Federation this morning for reuniting me with my glasses, because it does actually give me an opportunity to see what's on the page in front of me. I think the nature of this platform, if I may say so, just for a few moments, actually expresses more powerfully the fundamental values of sport than any organizational restructuring. And there is a constant theme this morning, and that theme is understandably change. We have a new European president, we have a new council, we have a new IAAF council and president, and we have all been through a year of elections. I don't think, and Sergei is sitting here, I don't think there's probably, Sergei, an area or continental election that we haven't actually sat through, watched, witnessed. And for all of us, this has been a seismic moment. It's been physically bruising and mentally challenging. And it has also given the sport, all our sports, all our federations, the opportunity, and I hate to use a footballing analogy at the moment, but it has actually given us a chance as federations to put our foot on the ball and think about where we need to be, as Thomas said a few moments ago, where we need to be, what it is that we demand from a modern structured sport that is responsive to changing patterns and trends. And I guess that's where my few remarks this morning will take me, but it also recognizes that all the structures in the world, all the corporate governances, all the institutional relationships count for nothing if you don't fundamentally have a group of people that understand why they're doing what they're doing. I can't think of any other gathering anywhere in the world at this moment, and probably not in Europe, that would bring so many different people from so many different backgrounds, nationalities, ethnicities, religious beliefs, cultural sets, cultural norms, under one roof for one common cause. and it is sport, and in our case, it is track and field, and that is something really worth celebrating. And when you see the platform there, you recognize that this isn't a relationship just between the IOC and the European Athletics Association or the IAAF or the individual member federations. It is actually a set of friendships. And those friendships will see the sport through its difficult times, its challenging times, its times of change, but it will also see the sport through the next 30 or 40 years, and that is, in essence, the nature of why we are here. It is about fostering and harnessing those relationships. Sven, when you got elected in Bled, you made a very important observation straight away. And you said that your first responsibility was to bring the family back together again. And I guess that was my first response. That was my first emotion once the dust had settled in the election in Beijing. And I am absolutely delighted, and Thomas, you made the comment, and your words were very generous, but I'm absolutely delighted to have sitting alongside me on this journey my Senior Vice President, Sergei Bubka. And Sergei was absolutely as true to his word. Throughout the campaign, he talked about serving the sport in any capacity. And halfway through the Beijing World Championships, I picked up the phone, and this was a particularly difficult time for him and his family. And I said, Sergei, I would be very honored if you would take the responsibility of Senior Vice President. And without hesitation, he said yes. And already we have formed a very good, strong, powerful team. My first visit was to the Balkans. I visited India just a few weeks ago. I'm here this morning. And the change and the necessity to drive the sport in a familiar and at all times sensible direction is only about relationships. And Sergei, I'm so pleased that you accepted that responsibility. And to my council colleagues, some newly elected and some re-elected, particularly on the IAAF, but also in the European Association, thank you for your continued commitment. When the numbers appeared on the screen behind me, my first response, understandably, was euphoria. It had been a long, hard campaign. I then looked out and it was panic, the thought of the enormity of the responsibility that sat in front of me, and then reassurance, because in the Congress Hall that day, rather in the way that I'm looking at all of you here this morning, I'm looking at people that have dedicated most of their lives to track and field, are passionate, loyal, have a reservoir of wisdom, and this is a journey that we will make together. This can never be a one-man crusade. The changes that both Sven has identified and talked about, and you voted constitutionally on this morning, and the changes that I'm going to touch upon in a few minutes can only be made on a journey of mutual respect and trust. And it is no surprise when I, of course, make the observation that two of the Olympic values are friendship and respect, and that is how we have to drive the sport on behalf of our athletes, our member federations, for many, many years to come. Thomas was right to point to the World Athletics Championships just recently in Beijing. I could not have asked for a better platform to begin my mandate than off the back of a World Athletics Championships. That, in my view, I've not competed in any of them. I'm slightly older than many of you in the room. But I can say that I've been to pretty much most of them as a spectator or as a working journalist or as a member of a commission or even as a bid leader in pursuit of an Olympic bid. I can genuinely say I think they were the best World Championships that I've ever witnessed. And I was particularly pleased, and I don't want this to become too parochial, but I was particularly pleased that again Europe finished on top of the heap. 49 medals, 2,000 athletes, 700,000 tickets sold over 9 days, full sessions morning and evening, 207 countries competing, again a record, 200 countries where our broadcast images were beamed to, and indicative numbers that are beginning to come through, showing that collectively across all those platforms, probably about 6 billion viewers. And again, I don't want to be too parochial, but Mo Farah, winning for the second time the distance double, was an extraordinary achievement, and one that will live indelibly in the lives of British track and field fans for many, many years to come. And it was lovely to see Daphne showing that it's not just Americans and Jamaicans that can sprint. So our task, my task, all our tasks, is to make sure that we build on that extraordinary global presence that European athletics has. And Sven, you made the right remark a few moments ago, that we have to work collaboratively and we have to reach out. And there are things that we can learn from other parts of the world. I have for some time, and I know that it's been a concern for many of you in here, particularly with a coaching background, about the diminution of our distance running in Europe. Maybe that is something that we can reflect in some of our development programs. But then again, it is a two-way street, because we have great expertise in our technical coaching, in our event management in Europe, and particularly the work we do with our officials and technical delegates. That's something that we can reach out with the transfer of knowledge that is so essential. But at all times, as Sven remarked, we need to work collaboratively. My first 7 weeks as president of the IAAF have been busy weeks. My first responsibility was to bring the family back together again as quickly as I could. And my second responsibility was to bring the family in Monaco all under one roof. For far too long, we had been distributed around the city. To build a collegiate team, I felt it was absolutely essential that we were all sitting under one roof and that the president sat with those teams. So that is now underway. The first appointment I made was to ask Nicholas Davis, many of you, well, all of you will know Nick, to be the director of my office. And I then asked Jose Maria Odrizola, the treasurer of the IAAF, in conjunction with some of my council colleagues, to go away and come back to me with a job description for what it is we're looking for in a chief executive. And Sven, I agree with you, and I think it's important that our constitutions and our protocols are in alignment. I also want to move towards a chief executive rather than a general secretary. So the process is now underway to seek a general secretary, chief executive. We have to make the adjustment to the constitution, and that man or woman that emerges will have a huge responsibility on their shoulders to help us drive the sport in the direction that we want to take it. I'm delighted, actually, that we are joined by our former General Secretary CEO, S.R. Gabriel, who snuck in earlier on this morning. We said goodbye to S.R. Just a few days ago in the office. We will be marking his term in office in a few days' time. But I would like to place on record, S.R., my thanks to you, particularly the way that you have managed the short transitional period. And also thank you for the work that you have done for the IAAF and the way you've served global athletics in the last few years. I also recognize that it was the right moment to look and set about a root and branch review of our structures, the organizations that drive us forward as an international federation. And also to look at the way we consume our resources. And I've asked for an independent piece of work that's already underway. The person I asked to do that was actually on the flight to Beijing the day after the election. I know there are many of you in this room that he has already spoken to. In our first council meeting in November, he will bring my colleagues up to speed with where he's got to. We have roughly 75 people in the organization and a few dotted around in our high performance and training facilities. I can report that as of 2 days ago, he'd spoken in length to 40 of them, not in any particular order, and that will include me and all the senior directors, but all the other heads of and functional areas. It's very, very important that we understand the nature of the organisation and the nature of the people that are working for us. And this, as I said, is my third official visit. I'm delighted that we've been very busy out there. And one of the issues that I do want to address is the way that we interact with our member federations and the way that we can be a swifter, more responsive international federation, making sure that we fundamentally understand three guiding principles. The first is that the IAAF has to be humble. We don't really deliver sport, you deliver sport. You identify the talent, you nurture that talent, you put the coaching programs to that talent, you bring the world-class programs to the talent, you create structures, you bring sponsors to the table, you interact with the media, you do that. We need to be an organisation that enables you to do that to the best possible effect. We also need to recognise that we have to be athlete-focused and centred. If we're not, why would we be doing this in the first place? And thirdly, we need to be responsive and flexible to those needs and those demands. Let me talk a little bit, if I may, about my first 100 days, because I think my focus really is on evaluating and building new systems and teams that help us to deliver. I've talked about the three guiding principles. We need to be a world-class organisation. We need to be athlete-focused. And in a few years' time, I want Thomas and Pat and the rest of world sport to look at our organisation as an exemplar of good practice. That is really, really important. We need to build on our reputation. We need to build on the values that we espouse as a sport, and we need to be able to articulate those internally and externally. And we need to underpin all that at all times with good corporate governance and with integrity. Hugh Roberts, many of you will know Hugh, has been acting in an ad hoc way as our legal counsel. I've asked Hugh to join us on a permanent basis. And the first responsibility I've asked him to look at is recasting the Constitution. Like most and many sporting constitutions, they come together for history, for elastoplast, for crisis. They come together as you occasionally need to adjust them. But this is a good moment to look at the Constitution to make sure that there are two or three concepts at the heart of it. One is it is fit to meet the criteria, the responsibilities of a modern sporting organisation, that it is in alignment as well as we can make it with our area associations and our member federations, and that it is, again, reflecting the world that we live in. I have also asked for the creation of an integrity unit in athletics. And that is not just about anti-doping, and I'll come on to that in a few moments. That is also to address some of the issues that we will, as a sport, be addressing and have already started to address, things like transfer of allegiance, age manipulation, illegal betting, all the things that are now the modern scourges and the challenges of sport. And it will be under the independent integrity unit within the IAAF that anti-doping now sits. And I will go into greater detail with my council colleagues, and that's being worked up at the moment. But I do want a system that is more independent, that relieves the member federations from some of the pressures, some of the resource implications, some of the challenges of a legalistic nature that will actually mean broadening the testing pool internationally, and reducing your international commitments, but allowing you to focus on what you do extremely well, which is national testing programs and educational programs as well. It will mean swifter management around our results. It will mean a swifter, I hope, period between testing and sanctioning. And I hope it will release some of those precious resources that I know you find tough and challenging sometimes when you're dealing with those legal challenges. So let me sort of pull the knitting together and be a little bit more prescriptive just for a few moments. Central to the processes of reviewing and building new structures, I'm today going to announce some quite widespread changes to the composition and function of our IAAF commissions. But all this, of course, has to be with the approval of my colleagues at the council meeting in November. And these changes are really aimed in two key areas. One is to broaden the experience and the ability that is available to our sport, both within the sport and outside the sport. And it really is to make sure that we have advisory bodies, whether they're commissions or special advisory groups, that are really more efficient, more focused, and more representative of our sport at large. And again, a few of the guiding principles. 10 commissions. I want the commissions to be smaller. I don't want those commissions to contain more than 10 people. I think they then become too difficult to get flexible, fast decisions. I want the better use of technology. I'll give one quick example. I chaired a press commission meeting not long ago. We saved ourselves $50,000. It was a very difficult time of the year. Our working media were out in their competition program, getting people. We used it to great effect. We sent a development team commission to Calais for the World Youth Championships. That also cost us a lot of money. So the use of new and modern technology that we now have in our headquarters in Monaco is not about replacing the face-to-face meetings, but augmenting those meetings, making sure that we're not just meeting once or just twice a year, and dealing with issues that may sometimes be a year old, but being able to be on top of those issues all the time so that we are responsive. I'm also going to announce this morning 4 new commissions. One I've already talked about is a values commission. I think this is really important, particularly for young people, but our ability to be able to articulate what our sport stands for and the core ideologies. An international relations and public affairs commission. An audit commission that will incorporate the finance and budget team, but with a greater forensic ability, and a new commission, youth and engagement. And Sergei spoke very eloquently throughout the campaign about the need to harness social and digital media to the lives of young people, to excite them, to make our sport relevant in their lives, and that commission will look at that very specifically. So in total, 10 commissions, 10 people, with the exception, of course, of the Athletes Commission, because that is an elected body. So the commissions will be Athletes Commission, Audit, as I said, incorporating finance and budget, coaches. I really want to elevate the level and status of coaching in our sport. The only reason I am standing here today is that I was the product of world-class coaching. Everywhere, and I know Sergei would support me on this, every federation that we spoke to in the campaign placed coaching very, very high up their list of priorities and resource commitments. Competition and development, of course, but with development I want to extend that into a specific area of e-learning. I want to make sure that in the transitional phase in the lives of an athlete, that when 4 or 5 years away from retirement, we can help them get into patterns of learning that may give them a better chance of picking up their careers. It is our responsibility as a federation, if we are calling upon the services of athletes for more than half their young lives, that we are able to be in a position to help them in the next phase of that journey. A medical, of course, and anti-doping values I've talked about, but that will incorporate youth and schools and youth engagement. And the Ethics Commission, which really is a standalone and independent body, I'm going to rename, again, with the approval of the Council, the IAAF Independent Ethics Board. So, in addition, I also want to create some special advisory groups. And let me be clear here, these are not advisory groups because I in any way am downgrading or taking the status away from these areas of activity. I have for some time been concerned about the speed with which good ideas that often gestate in organizations and gatherings like this take to get to the table in practical terms. I joined the Council in Paris in 2003. It wasn't the first time it had appeared on the agenda, but there was an item there, and Sergei will remember, about the World Relay Championships. We didn't actually witness the World Relay Championships for another 12 years. We cannot, as a sport, afford to spend that length of time in gestation. We really do need to get the good ideas out and practically applicable as quickly as we can. There's no other activity in the world that would sit 12 years figuring out that it had a good idea, but witnessing it maybe that length of time longer, and capturing the imagination and the landscape of young people is absolutely essential in that area. So it's speed of decisions, it's trends, it's innovation, it's making sure that those special advisory groups can come back with fast, responsive, flexible, realistic ambitions, and they will be in commercial and marketing, calendar harmonization. Thomas, you quite rightly made the point this morning that harmonization of calendars is really important. I want to create a conflict and arbitration group. Far too often we have long-running difficulties for member federations, sometimes with their National Olympic Committees, sometimes with autonomy and independence issues around their governments. And so often we sort of start with a code book or a constitution. Sometimes these are just simple negotiations. And to have an arbitration team made up of member federations, those who have got skill sets in this area, that can go and troubleshoot in these areas before these issues become deep-seated. And some of them I'm witnessing, some of them are on my desk now, are challenges that we've been confronting for 4 or 5 years. We really do need to look at these in a very different way. The one-day meetings I talked about and announced in the Balkans, press and media ops, sustainable development, television and digital, and of course the WAS renovation. That's a very powerful body of work that was presented to the Council. We now need to make sure we are implementing it. So, presidents, plural. I hope from the few words that, and the direction of travel that I've given you this morning, you are in no doubt at all about the priorities as laid out for my first mandate. The IAAF does need to be a responsive partner. It needs to have robust governances. It needs to be innovative. It needs to be a world-class, transparent organization, and it needs to be fit to deliver to the member federations, those of you sitting out in front of me this morning, that on a day-by-day, hour-by-hour, minute-by-minute basis are delivering our wonderful sport. It needs to be a modern, athlete-focused organization, and it needs, as we have said on so many occasions this morning, to be attractive and exciting to young people and to an extended fan base and audience base. So I'm very, very grateful, and let me place on thanks place on record my deep and abiding thanks for those of you who were so generous with your time in the last year, giving me that framework and that underpinning understanding about where you want to see our sport journey in the next few years. I will do my very best to be as accessible and as open and prepared to be challenged at all times by you. Kick the tires, tell me when I'm getting it wrong, but at all times be on that journey with me. And I really genuinely think we have some very, very exciting years ahead of us. Thank you for the invitation to be here this morning, and I look forward to hosting you for lunch, but don't worry, there will not be another speech. Thank you very much indeed.